It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Well, hello and welcome to this Tuesday, June 6th edition of RealAg Radio. I am your occasional host, Lyndsey Smith, coming at you from just west of Ottawa. It is very smoky. So we have just to the north of us in Quebec, we have several wildfires that are burning and sending a lot of smoke across the Ottawa area, the Ottawa Valley. And certainly we are not alone this year. Alberta, of course, has had some tremendous wildfires. Nova Scotia is just recovering and still has some ongoing. And now we've got Quebec in the mix. And of course, BC always has a wildfire season, but they are struggling as well. So I have to tell you, I am very thankful for healthy lungs because I definitely feel for those who are struggling with any sort of lung issues because this smoke is thick and it is a very strange thing to have a very yellow, sort of hazy, smoky environment walking around. It's just a bit bizarre. So I hope everyone is safe. Let's hope those any livestock are out of the way. Let's hope our firefighters are working their butts off and trying to keep people and homes as protected as possible. Okay, today's show, well, wait, let's back up a bit. I'm going to start calling this Tuesdays with Lyndsey. And if anybody has read Tuesdays with Maury, it's going to be sort of the same in that it's not at all. But it just sounds good to say Tuesdays with Lyndsey. So your regular host, Sean Haney, of course, still in the driver's seat. But to account for some summer schedules and all those sorts of good things, the Tuesday show is going to be my show for the next couple weeks. So I also am going to be filling in perhaps a little bit more often through the month as we account for some travel schedules and those sorts of things. So you'll be hearing from me quite a bit, which is super exciting. So I'm actually going to be hosting Friday's show as well with the issues panel. We'll have a beef market update as well. I'll be on next week, Monday and Tuesday, but Tuesdays with Lyndsey is a new thing. So I want to get to know you. You'll get to know me a bit better, especially if you're new to the show. You maybe haven't heard me around. But as always, love to get your feedback. My email address is lsmith@realagriculture.com. And I would love to hear from you. I always appreciate getting emails. You can also find me across social media at Real Loud Lyndsey, and that's LYNDSEY. Or, of course, just find at Real Agriculture across all our platforms, and you can find me through there as well. So would love to hear what you might want to hear on the show. If you've got a story lead, any of those things, just send them along and I'll do my best to follow up and get them on the show. Okay, what's happening this week? Well, it is Local Food Week here in Ontario, so I'm not sure if your province or state has a Local Food Week or day, but yes, here in Ontario, we celebrate Local Food Week. I think it's because people really love rhubarb, asparagus, and strawberries, which are, of course, the first fresh bits that come out of the garden. And so this week, it is all about celebrating local food. So I, for one, will absolutely be partaking in rhubarb everything. And I know rhubarb is a very controversial plant. Is it fruit? I guess it's a vegetable. Oh my gosh. Someone let me know. Is rhubarb a fruit or a vegetable? Technically it's a stalk, so that's a vegetable. Oh my gosh, that just blows my mind. Anyway, I love rhubarb. My dad, I'll tell you a fun story. My dad hates rhubarb and would actually, quote unquote, forget where the rhubarb plant was and mow it over every spring. Mostly so that my mother couldn't actually use it to make things so that he wouldn't have to eat them. So there you go. Way to go, Dad. Way to be passive aggressive. Okay. On to the show. Today's show, great lineup. So we've got a Farming Smarter product spotlight. We've got a super cool story from Omid McDonald here just west of Ottawa at Almont. His company, Distillery, makes vodka from cow's milk, well, from milk permeate. But Dairy Distillery is partnering with the Michigan milk producers to make an ethanol plant out of milk permeate. So we're going to hear about that. We've also got Tom Harrison with the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Foundation to talk about conservation easements and actually valuing those conservation easements. So we promised on Friday's show that we would discuss that a bit further. So I've got Tom on the show as well. And to round out the show, we're going to have Dale Cowan of AGRIS Co-op here in southwestern Ontario to break down estimating N mineralization from the soil in order to decide on that side dress number for corn. So that is going to be a good one. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with Tom Harrison right after this.
We have the financial tool you're looking for. An advance payments program, Cash Advance from CCGA, is a low-cost farm financial tool that can help cover your spring working capital needs. Borrow your first $350,000 interest-free, with the rest at prime less 0.75%. Apply on over 50 commodities. Call our experienced team or visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. All right. As promised on Friday, we did talk about a study that Saskatchewan Stock Growers Foundation and Association had looked at in trying to value conservation easements in order to encourage ranchers, of course, to take on conservation easements, but to make them fair. So to break this all down and to discuss why this study was even done and what happens sort of next, we've got Tom Harrison of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Foundation joining me now. Welcome here, Tom. Tell me about the foundation. I think most are familiar with the Stock Growers Association, but you're with the foundation. What's that all about?
That's right. Yeah, everybody knows that the association is a member-based organization that was designed over 113 years ago to it was actually set up to protect grazing interests and talk about things like conserving grassland. The foundation itself was created only 3-4 years ago, and it was set up as an arm's length organization to the association, but it's a registered charity recognized by the Canadian Revenue Agency, and it can hold conservation easements, and it can hold conservation agreements with landowners. And we are recognized by the Ministry of Environment. The biggest thing that probably differentiates us from the association is that being a registered charity, we don't have any lobbying capacity, and whereas the association can lobby, and that's one of the things they do. They lobby on behalf of their members. So our goal was set up mainly to, like I said, set up these conservation agreements and conservation easements with the whole goal of managing and protecting our native grasslands.
Sorry, you cut out a bit there. So the native grasslands, the prairie grasslands. So yep. Just last week, some really interesting work that's come out. So it's a study that looked at what sort of income we can generate from, say, a cow-calf operation versus a grain rotation on Saskatchewan farmland in a particular area. And this is all sort of done in the context of conservation easements. What are actually, what's agreed upon, what's paid for. Why? First, walk me through just why this study was undertaken. To compare a rotation versus a cow-calf, so a grazing-based operation.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that we've struggled with over the last several years, even before the foundation was completed, was getting producers to sign not only conservation easements but agreements, and I think we felt like the current system wasn't working. So back in 2019, we actually did a study where we compared the net revenue from grazing versus the net revenue from a 3-crop rotation in southwest Saskatchewan. And at that point in time, we found the discrepancy was there in favor of the cropping. So, and that's fine. But since then, we've been having like almost 3 years of discussions around how much do we pay a producer for a conservation easement, particularly a term conservation easement. And there's been a lot of back and forth with the federal government on this. And the traditional model uses the devaluation of the land. So they basically do a fair market valuation of the land with an easement and without an easement. And the difference would be what the value of that conservation easement would be in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. There's, typically it runs at 25 to 35% of the fair market value is what the devaluation is usually by putting a conservation easement on your title. We wanted to explore other situations or other tools to come up with a valuation because there is some problems with using the fair market valuation, and we wanted to look at that. So we went back to that original study, and we contracted Dr. Jared Carlsworth about that, and he sort of redid that. He looked at the assumptions made in the previous study, and he felt like, yep, those were good assumptions, and he redid a tool to evaluate. And I mean, you'd have to talk to Jared about exactly what the tool is if you wanted to find the nuts and bolts of it. But what it came up with is, for say a conservation easement of 20 years, there is it's about $580 per acre of value there. So, and of course, these numbers can be played with. Things like the discount rate, things like the length of the agreement, whether you're actually using average numbers or above or below average numbers, or if you're playing with the cost of breaking up this land, that number can fluctuate. But it does, in all cases, it came up with in favor of the cropping systems. They just, like the annual cropping sector is pretty, I don't know, I wouldn't say lucrative, but I mean, it's better than grazing is right now. But
So let's sort of unpack this a little bit, though. So it basically, so this is good. So it basically updated, sort of took that 2019 study, sort of updated it with a few, maybe a different lens on it, and has come up with this sort of different. So from the foundation's perspective, what do you take from this? Where do you go with this number? If the foundation's goal is to conserve grasslands and native prairie habitat and keep it grazed, how do you take this sort of number and what do you do with it now? What do you hope happens sort of going forward?
Well, what I hope does is it gives us another tool to evaluate how much we need to pay the producers to sign conservation easements that recognizes the true value of these easements and the restrictions that are placed upon them. So we haven't signed any easements yet, but we're working on. And of course, we kind of need the federal government's blessing if we go ahead with this. If we're hoping to, access federal dollars in the future. So right now we can look at this and we can say, okay, for a 25-year easement or a 50-year easement, we can pay this amount of dollars on this type of soils and come up with anything. So, we can still go back to the old traditional model and looking at the difference in fair market valuation. And the big thing that we got to come across there is, okay, all of that is for a perpetual easement. So we have to come up with a model or a tool to estimate what percentage of the full amount of a perpetual easement we would pay for a term. Mm-hmm. And what it's coming, there's been a few studies done on that. And typically what we're seeing is somewhere, say for a 35-year easement, we'd be looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 55 to 75% of what a perpetual easement would get paid for. Mm-hmm. So it just gives us another tool to come up with a dollar figure that we can pay the producer with.
Right, and gives you sort of more, it gives you numbers that you can also use to, if you're going to potentially access federal funding, it gives you hard numbers that you can actually work with, right? So I guess to back up a little bit more for those who are not maybe familiar with what a conservation easement might look like, what does that mean in terms of, so if I'm a rancher and I'm going to sign up for a conservation easement on my land, what does it mean I can do or not do on that land? Does it mean I basically just have to keep it in grass, or are there other sort of guidelines of what happens with an easement?
Yeah, of course, there is restrictions placed on the title of the land, and typically those restrictions include, you cannot break or cultivate or destroy the habitat. You can't develop it. That means, no houses, no roads. And, what you would do is you would exclude any yard sites from the area of the easement. Mm-hmm. But if we're still here to support rancher viability, so anything to do with grazing or grazing management, the creation of new fences or building existing fences or new water sources, those are all fully acceptable. Cows can still run on it. And the restrictions are not tied to the condition of the land. We want producers to have a healthy functioning rangeland, but we can't put that on as a restriction.
Mm-hmm. So, and so we've talked about sort of perpetuity, and we've talked about terms. Is there a preference as far now? From the conservation side of protecting grazing land, obviously you want it to be as long as possible, but what is sort of the general feeling as far as how long some of these easements, what's the easiest ones to sort of get producers to say yes to? Is perpetuity a big stumbling block for some?
Oh yeah. We've done, a few surveys, and when we've talked to producers on their willingness to accept payment for conservation easement, there's a huge reluctance to sign things in perpetuity, but they seem open to the concept of a finite length of term to sign something up. So, and even at that, there's still some reluctance to even sign anything that goes on title. So, mm-hmm. And of course it depends on the situation you're in. Like if a rancher is at the end of his career, and he's got nobody to pass it on to, and he wants to, make sure that it's conserved, maybe, a donation in perpetuity is something that he would explore. Mm-hmm. But if you're a young rancher and you're just starting out and you want your next generation to have a chance to renegotiate, say in 35 years, that's a different, that gives them some, bargaining. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's up to everybody's own personal situation. Everybody has to think, take a lot of thought and do some careful thinking into, why and if they would put on an easement on their land.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, Tom, thank you so much. This is super interesting stuff. We'll be doing a bit more digging into that study, of course, and what happens going forward. So I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Hey, no problem.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and Sean Haney will be back with today's Product Spotlight with Farming Smarter right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from realagriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight. Today we're talking to Farming Smarter. Joining us right now is Jamie Puchinger. She's the assistant manager with Farming Smarter based out of Lethbridge, Alberta. Jamie, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, let's talk about some of the summer programming you have going on there at Farming Smarter. What's on the agenda for the summer months?
Yeah, so we've got a couple events in June and then another couple in July. Our first event is actually next week, June 15th, here at Farming Smarter. It's our field school, and we have a number of really great topics, including roller crimping cover crops, residue management, IPM in cereal production, and best nutrient and irrigation practices.
So what's kind of the mission here to sort of explore some of these different agronomic practices and sort of, I guess, truth test some of them, and then bring growers and experts in to have a look, discuss, and kind of do some group learning? Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, for sure. So we have different research trials, obviously, that we have going on at Farming Smarter that we'll be looking at, but we also do bring in experts. So the gentleman that's coming to talk about the nutrient and irrigation practices is from USDA in Idaho. So we try and bring in people that can help shed light on things that are happening maybe in other parts of the world that potentially could or couldn't work here, as well as what is or isn't working here as far as the research goes.
As you talk to some of the people that are, the farmers that are very, very tapped into what's going on at Farming Smarter, what are some of the things that is really top of mind for them right now that they really, really want to better understand?
I think for the most part, we tend to see a variety of things that come at us. So every time we hear a concern or agronomic practices or technology or equipment concerns or issues, that's when we take those and we try and put it into a project application so that we can study it a little bit further, check out what research has been done to make sure that we're not duplicating work that's already out there, and we'll submit those, and then we try and share as we learn and as we research with everybody. And so one of the things that we really noted the last couple of years is the soils piece. And so conservation is taking sort of a feature again in both the provincial as well as the federal minds as far as, climate change and the carbon sequestration, and how do we manage the soil as far as our irrigated specialty crops, where they tend to have a lot of tillage, because we have seen major wind events, in particular over winter, when nothing's protecting the soil, causing major problems. So it's one of the things that we're working on this year in research.
Yeah, there's a practicality to it. It's not research that's aloof, like in sort of pie in the sky. This is practical research.
Everyday help.
Yeah, right. That's what really, I think, makes it enticing, and something that, growers of any size or scale can relate to, because it's okay. I can actually see how I would potentially implement this on the farm, and and if successful, get me to a return on investment quicker than something that I'm dealing with at 100,000 feet, right?
That is the goal for us, yes.
Yeah, because now still Farming Smarter is still farmer led, right?
It is, yeah. Majority of our board is producer.
So how does somebody, if they're interested in attending any of the field days and the summer program that you have going on, how do they find out more and where do they register?
Sure. Everything can be found on our website, so farmingsmarter.com. We launched a new one at the beginning of April, so we're still tweaking things. But you should be able to easily navigate to our events page and find the upcoming events and what's all included in the agendas.
Jamie, thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Thanks, Sean.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
ABJ Agri-Products is North America's exclusive distributor for air bubble jets and easy jets. These sprayer nozzles reduce the number of driftable droplets and at the same time maintain a uniform droplet size, primarily between 300 and 400 micron, ensuring more even dispersion of your chemical products, providing reduced drift and increased plant coverage. Let us help improve your spraying operation by visiting abjagra.com. That's abjagri.com.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And did you hear? Alpine brand liquid fertilizers is turning 50 this year. From the beginning, we have always applied the 4R principles in our approach to the fertilizer industry with the right source, right rate, right place, and right time. We are committed to Canadian farmers always delivering the highest quality liquid products, including our patented, award-winning BioK line of nutrients. To find out more, visit us at alpinepfl.com. That's alpinepfl.com or call 1-800-265-2268 today. All right, we go now to a fascinating idea. Can you make ethanol out of milk byproducts? Apparently, yes. Joining me now is Omid McDonald. He's the founder of Dairy Distillery. Welcome to the show, Omid.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. So, Omid, for those who don't know, we're going to start with Dairy Distillery, and then we're going to talk about a really exciting new project that you're working on. But what exactly is vodka?
So vodka is vodka made from milk. Not directly milk. We use a dairy byproduct called milk permeate, where all the sugar in the milk ends up, and we ferment that, distill it, and turn it into a delicious vodka we call vodka.
It is delicious. I can attest. Now, so let's back up just a little bit. When did Dairy Distillery begin? It's been a couple years now.
It has. So in 2017, I was looking for an idea to start a distillery and really didn't come across anything I thought could be worthwhile pursuing. And then my cousin had come back from his uncle's dairy farm and was talking about milk being dumped. And I was like, wonder if we could turn that into alcohol. And so that's when the adventure started, and we built our distillery in 2018 here, and vodka was released at the end of that year.
Now, and of course, so there is the vodka, which is the vodka product, the spirit. You've got a cream version. The maple version is amazing. There was an eggnog one. So that has expanded. And one thing I noticed, Omid, when we went through the pandemic, I started seeing Dairy Distillery hand sanitizer showing up. So how did that all come to be?
Well, who knew that vodka and hand sanitizer are pretty much the same thing? So when the pandemic hit, we got calls from local businesses and people asking for hand sanitizer, and we're like, oh, well, the big guys are going to be able to handle the demand. But then when I got a call from the Ottawa hospital saying, we have no hand sanitizer, can you help? Well, when a hospital calls, and especially Ottawa hospital, you drop everything and respond. So we pivoted to, we stopped all spirits production and really focused on making sanitizer for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Now, okay, so that brings us, so vodka, as you said, uses milk permeate. So it is a byproduct of dairy processing. So it has the sugar in it and other things in it. How much milk permeate did you start out with from using up from the particular processing plant that you were working with at the beginning?
So we get our milk permeate from the Lactalis factory in Winchester, Ontario. It's about 45 minutes away from us. And they had just turned on their ultra-filtered milk machine. And that was all new stuff to me. They explained how they concentrate the proteins in the skim milk to make it easier to make cheese and yogurt. And when they do that, they take out the water and the lactose, which is the sugar in the milk. And so right now we are taking in about 40,000 liters of that permeate every week, and which is a small volume from their supply of it. And just to put it in context, in the U.S., there's about 500,000 tons of milk permeate produced every year, and 80% of it goes to feed pigs. So we were, obviously, if we could turn it all into vodka, that'd be great, but that'd be hundreds of millions of bottles of vodka, and we were looking for a higher volume use, and that's what this in a new direction.
Right. Okay. And so this is the really exciting part that is sort of this amazing evolution and trying to make the most out of what is a byproduct of, other products that we're trying to make. So as you said, cheese and yogurts and those sorts of things. So, but we are left with some water. Well, not just some, as you mentioned, a lot. So tell me about then. So now you've partnered with the Michigan Milk Producers Association to actually create ethanol and an entire ethanol plant from milk permeate. So how did that all come about?
Well, even before we connected with the Michigan milk producers, we very early on, I realized that there's a large volume of this milk permeate, and did some research and found in the 70s, people during the oil crisis started converting lactose, the sugar in milk, into ethanol for fueling cars. And the purpose they did it back then was for energy security. And so around that time, I was introduced to a gentleman who worked for a biofuels company here in town called Iogen. And he was looking for a new opportunity, and so he joined us. So Dave Garros has been researching and building the plans for a large-scale milk permeate ethanol plant for about 3 years now. And about 2 years ago, the Michigan Milk Producers Association came across us through Vodcal. They wanted to make vodka with their milk permeate, and after we explained, their milk permeate would produce about 47 million bottles of vodka, we said, well, that'd be hard to sell. Let's look at the ethanol opportunity.
So this is fascinating because, of course, so Iogen, as you mentioned, they here in Ontario, they use corn to turn into ethanol. So already in the ethanol business, is it a significantly different plant that you have to build to use permeate to turn into ethanol? Like, did in the planning process, as this is all going forward, because I think we're looking at a 2025 completion of this plant that's been announced, was this creating new technology to make this happen, or is all the technology there? It's just sort of putting it all together.
Well, the yeast and so on is the sort of magic sauce to this. That we worked with the University of Ottawa to figure out how to ferment the milk permeate. But really, the innovation is looking at this from a different perspective. So, in the 70s, people looked at fermenting permeate for energy security. Well, we're looking at it as a way of reducing carbon footprint. And so that the advantage of making ethanol from milk permeate is that we don't have all the upstream carbon impact for our sugar. So the milk permeate comes to us carbon neutral, whereas if you're making it from corn, you have to account for all the fertilization, cultivation, and so on, all the carbon impact of growing that corn. And so that and very efficient production allows us to make essentially carbon neutral ethanol. And that creates a much larger carbon offset compared to corn ethanol. And so that's really the important thing here is that we're able to make the world's lowest carbon intensity ethanol which displaces the most carbon when it's blended in transportation fuel.
Right, and that is part of the Michigan milk producers. This is part of their net zero initiative, or their carbon reduction initiative, is to use this permeate. What's the estimate for once the plant is online as to how much ethanol would be produced from this plant once it's up and running?
So the plant will produce just over 2 million gallons of ethanol, and that'll be blended in with local transportation fuel. And it will offset 14,000 tons of carbon. And that offset will be linked to the dairy products produced at the Constantine facility in Michigan. And so that essentially will have the effect of reducing the carbon footprint of the dairy produced there by about 5%.
Which is, that's pretty significant when you put it that way. Now, so I guess the question then as well, so we've got, here in Canada, we also have dairy processors. We're making vodka. Why Michigan? Will we see it here in Canada, do you think?
We've identified sources of permeate where we could aggregate and make a plant here in Ontario. We've also identified sources in the Western Canada. But a big difference in the U.S. is the Inflation Reduction Act. So this is new legislation that's allocating, people estimate in the trillions of dollars to green projects. And so they've put real money behind efforts to reduce carbon footprint, and we just don't have that kind of support here in Canada yet.
Fascinating, the differences on either side of the border. Very cool. Omid, this has been just absolutely fascinating. I mean, vodka itself is pretty cool, but to think then that we can sort of take, as you said, the magic sauce, the yeast, and be able to convert and actually be able to run our vehicles, at least on a part of milk, is pretty cool. So, Omid, I really appreciate your time today, and we'll be following along and anxiously looking forward to this plant coming online. And I hope you'll be there for the ribbon cutting and send us some pictures.
For sure. Well, thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day, Omid. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
All right. Thank you to Omid McDonald of Dairy Distillery. Highly recommend checking out the company. You can order in Ontario. You can actually order vodka. Try it. It's delicious. I promise. Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with Dale Cowan of AGRIS Co-op to talk about end mineralization and side dress strategies right after this. Join us for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, August 15th to 17th at Calgary, Alberta. Spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos, and experience bullfighting at the closing party. Proud, innovative, and loyal, we are beef. Registration is now open. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now is Mr. Dale Cowan with AGRIS Co-op. How are you, Dale?
I'm just great. Thanks for asking.
All right. So this is an exciting time for the corn crop because, of course, we are approaching side dress timing. Now, I'm many hours away from where you are, Dale. So what stage, on average, is the corn crop where you are?
I would say generally on average, we're what we call V2 to V3. So we'd be looking at 3 to 4, maybe 5 leaf corn. So we're just in that ideal window for getting the nitrogen on side dress time.
Okay. So now this is the the question, how much do you put on? So let's start with, what are the nitrate tests telling us? Have you been pulling these on individual fields? Because, of course, we don't have the provincial ones necessarily right now, or maybe ever, to depend on. Are you pulling some nitrate tests, and what are they telling you?
Well, yeah, we are, and so we have to put it in perspective. We're not doing a large acreage because it's just logistically a nightmare, and so we're picking some sentinel fields that represent a practice or represent an area or a soil type, and so right now we've been concentrating on some fields where there's been organic amendments applied last fall, some cover crops, and then, of course, some traditional nitrogen management where we put some in on pre-plant and then we come back and do the side dress. So it's really a mixed bag of results. So if you, the one that's most interesting to me at the moment is a biosolids application was put on last August that was supposed to provide 220 pounds of plant available nitrogen to the following crop. And the only problem with that is the following crop was this May of 2023. So it was a long time in between. So obviously all that nitrogen is not going to be there. So the nitrate soil test that we did take came back still recommending around 95 to 100 pounds of nitrogen. So telling me that a couple things, that organic N either mineralized and got leached away, and everybody thinks last year was really dry, and it was, but we totally recharged our subsoils over the winter, so we did recover from our drought. So there was some water movement through the soil. Or the other scenario is that organic N hasn't yet all released, which I have a hard time believing. So there's a scenario where our farmer was counting on not using a lot of commercial N, and then we changed his practice to go to side dress so we could actually assess the nitrogen supply with a nitrate soil test, and then put on the appropriate rate of side dress and save the income. So that's one scenario.
Mm-hmm. Now, one question on that one. You said, did you say it went on in August, the biosolids?
In August.
Yeah.
August last year. And first-time user and, no cover crop to capture any nitrogen.
Right,
so it doesn't surprise me that we are where we are on that one. So.
Yeah. Okay. So now what about if you've got those fields that perhaps had a cover crop, what does the nitrate number look like there?
Well, surprisingly lower than expected, and this is the thing with cover crops. You don't have a lot of benchmark. No one does a cover crop check strip anywhere. You either grow a cover crop or you don't. So it's really hard. So you kind of go on some historical values on, say, an OP, or last year it was, we're looking at almost 90 pounds coming from the OP cover crop mix, and this year I'm hard pressed to see any. So you get that difference there, and the mineralization rates have been low this spring, and determined by the fact that we're 100 heat units behind on corn, so we just haven't had the temperature, and we've been dry. So those two things drive mineralization, moisture, and temperature, and we just haven't had those things. So, and we're also seeing it in the wheat crop. We're seeing some odd patterns in the wheat, and that's, we count on 50 to 100 pounds of N coming out of the soil on top of our spring application, and I don't think that's there, and that's showing up in the wheat crop. And
again, so as you mentioned, that's a moisture temperature driver, right, is what mineralizes that N, and we realistically in May short on both.
Yeah, and just to recap, mineralization is conversion of organic N to ammonium N. We're not talking about nitrate yet. We're just talking about converting, because when we do the nitrate soil test, we only measure nitrate and ammonium. We don't do any accounting of organic N, and never did. So that's the question mark, is if you do have an organic source out there, we've missed about 45 days of mineralization, and I've been working with the nitrate soil test for 3 decades, and my experience is if the values aren't there now, it's hard for us to catch up later in the season. So I tend to believe within reason that these nitrate values are a little lower than we're expecting.
Right. And so that is the key there as well, right? Is that the corn crop, of course, takes up, quite a bit before going reproductive, but it's still going to continue to draw. And we need to make sure that N is there later in the season. And so from your experience, if the N mineralization has not materialized at this point, we really need to make sure that side dress amount is going to feed that crop going forward. So I guess that begins the question of, what's the process, I guess, of taking, let's say you did pull some nitrate values for your own fields, or you pulled them for a client. What is the process of then deciding, all right, this is the rate we're going in with?
Well, fortunately in Ontario, we have the Ontario Nitrogen Calculator, which is a really interesting tool. It's been somewhat maligned, but the new version is quite good. And it provides you with a space to actually enter your nitrate soil test. And it overrides whatever pre-plant or side dress rate that would be recommended without the PSNT. So you can go ahead and let's say you put 70 pounds of N on at planting time. You wait a month, you come back, you put your nitrate soil test in the middle of the row, stay away from the starter bands. And now you've got an assessment of what's needed after that initial 70 pounds, and that's what the nitrate test is going to indicate. So we're seeing in some fields right now, typically, that we're calling for another 100 to 130 pounds of nitrogen on top of the 70, which is pretty indicative of what most people have been applying to get over 200 bushel to the acre. So it seems to be lining up quite well at this present time. So
now, so what about nitrogen stabilizers? Because this is a question that definitely comes up. We're in a very dry, at least right now, a pretty dry cycle. I'm right now sitting west of Ottawa in absolute smoke, so really hoping that we've got some rain coming. So the question always is there an N stabilizing product that can protect against losses, but in dry conditions? Are we really worried about that? How do we make that call? What's that decision?
Well, there's two things. So when we look at our side dress application with UAN, seldom is it going in much below soil surface. I've not seen too many people put it much more than an inch and a half. And certainly any deeper than 2 inches is pretty rare. So when you concentrate UAN in a band, we've seen in some of the Greg Jury's work, a nitrogen stabilizer that includes a urease inhibitor will stop that volatilization loss out of that trench. And it can be quite significant. So under these dry conditions where you don't get good closure on the knife opening, I think there's a benefit to the end vol. And of course, the product usually is a dual inhibitor. It also contains a nitrification inhibitor. And, of course, these things protect when you have conditions for nitrogen loss. So it's always a debate. But if we start to get some heavy rainfall, which who knows, then that nitrification inhibitor is going to slow up the conversion of ammonium to nitrate. So that's still going to be an option out there, even in dry soil conditions. It's going to slow up that conversion. And nitrate's the only form that can be lost from the soil once it's ameliorated into the soil. And so whether you have waterlogged conditions or leaching conditions, you're protected for up to 3 weeks with some of these products. So it is a decision that's made on a risk management approach as to what are the conditions likely for loss. But these dual products that contain urease inhibitor, especially on side dress, I think they still have value.
Mm-hmm. Now, and I'm glad you mentioned sort of the depth part of it, because of course, let's say we're knifing in quite deep, and we get good slot closure, we're less concerned. But in dry conditions, how sure can you be that you're closing that slot and protecting that nitrogen, right?
Right, that's correct. And most of the times we're not side dressing all that deep when I'm out in the field looking at some of these. It takes horsepower and a lot of soil disturbance. And if you disturb too much soil, it interrupts your herbicide layer too. So then you have with weeds in the slot. So there's lots of reasons not to go crazy with the depth. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So just before I let you go, Dale, how are the soybeans looking? Just quickly. I hear that there are a lot that have struggled to emerge.
Yes, there are, and so certainly the clay soils tend to be where we're seeing some difficulty, either slotted in when it wasn't really fit, or ground was worked and dried out and, there's not into moisture. So waiting for a rain to get some of those up. Certainly some fields have crusted over, although, we haven't had that much rain. So that half-inch rain was something we really needed, but in some fields it was just enough to silt over that seed trench. So, we're struggling with the soybeans for sure, especially in the clay soils. And the big question now is the replant, how much, and you've got seed sitting in dry soil. It doesn't make much point to reseed until we see a rain. And if you are going to reseed, you got to put it in the moisture. And then sometimes that moisture is down 3 inches deep, and going deep when it's warm isn't as bad as going deep when it's cold, but it's just patience is what's required. So I was actually in a field last week. On Tuesday, we had 40% emergence, and on Thursday, we had 80% emergence. So we went from scrambling to find seed for replant to saying, I don't need to replant. So we got to be a little bit patient on some of these fields yet to see what's going to come. So it's only the first part of June, so we got time yet.
We're not going to panic till like the 20th? Is that when we're going to panic? Let me know what date is the panic date, Dale. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. You want the 20th? Sure. Let's take the 20th.
Sure, let's take it. All right. We'll be patient until then and hope for some rain to help us all out. All right, Dale, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
You're quite welcome. Thank you, Lyndsey. Have a good day.
All right. And with that, Tuesdays with Lyndsey comes to an end. But don't worry, it's the first of many. So yes, as I mentioned, for the next few weeks, Tuesdays will be me in the driver's seat. So that's Lyndsey Smith. And I'm super looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun to have a bit of, a show that's on the schedule. I can plan for it all week. It'll be a lot of fun. So if you've got feedback on today's show or other shows, you can always call that feedback line 1-855-776-6147. You can find us across social media at Real Agriculture. We have a YouTube channel. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. We're probably there. You can find more of our content there. You can get in touch with our people. We're everywhere, frankly. And so lots of great ways to find us. You can use the hashtag RealAg Radio, and that usually helps us find your responses, your ideas, your questions, your pictures, all those sorts of things. We enjoy it all, so send it along. Did want to mention, of course, yes, Friday is the issues panel. I will be hosting Friday's show as well. We'll have a beef market update with Ann Wasco, as always, every second Friday. And Kelvin Hepper will be joining me. I haven't lined up the second issues panel guest, so I'll get on that, I guess. I'll put it on my to-do list. But big thank you, of course, to all my guests today, to Omid McDonald, to Tom Harrison, to Dale Cowan, and of course to Farming Smarter for our product spotlight. If you've got more questions about N mineralization and choosing that side dress number for corn, last night's show, The Agronomist, so on Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, I host The Agronomist. Last night's show, we had Jason DeBruin out of Iowa, who's with Corteva Agriscience, and we had Peter Johnson, of course, here with Real Agriculture on the show to talk about not just, more about what Dale spoke about, and also dug into some of the research on what we know about how much nitrogen the corn crop needs. There's some really neat info in there about how much of nitrogen the corn crop will actually essentially remobilize from leaves and stems for the grain fill period. But that obviously it can only take so much, or of course the plant would fall over if it took everything out of the stem. So some really fascinating stuff. Big thanks to Jason and to Peter for joining me on that show. So that is The Agronomists. If you head to YouTube, it goes live 8 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel, or you can always find last night's episode and all episodes at realagriculture.com/agronomists. Check it out. It's a good show. And hey, if you can, join us live, because the questions, the comments, the camaraderie between everybody there on a Monday night is frankly what makes it so much fun. And I appreciate everyone who joins us. Okay, just like I appreciate all of you listening here to Real Ag Radio. Again, I'm Lyndsey Smith. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk again on Friday. Cheers, everybody.